Hello and welcome to Adventures in AI, where the Insight Flow team members share things that have caught our attention over the past week and talk about our own experiences in the world of AI. If you'd like to talk to us about any of the topics discussed in this episode, email us on ai@insightflow.io. That's ai@insightflow.io. Or you can follow us at InsightFlow1 on X or InsightFlow-IO on LinkedIn. I'm Giles.
I'm Rich.
And I'm Graham. And this week we're going to do another one of our sessions of looking at today's applications of AI, things you can actually do usefully today. And this one is one of Giles's favorite conversations. So we're going to be looking at the fact that you can use AI to help you create mentors and personalized mentors and actually vastly increase the coaching and mentoring that you can do for your teams. So, Giles, your favorite topic at the moment?
It is. Well, it's an area where I think AI has a massive amount to offer. So I think just to set this up, there's kind of two ways or two sides to this. One is the mentor or coach, and the other is the mentee or coachee, I guess it is. So if you're providing coaching or mentoring services, then, and I'll take a really simple example of just a fitness coach, for example, then you can only take on the number of clients that you have is based on the number of hours you've got in the day where you can work. And so you can't really scale. If you're offering that as a business, you can't really scale. And the only way you can scale, which a lot of people have done, is starting things like a podcast or a YouTube channel, and then you can dispense your advice more widely. Coachy or mentoree, then you only have access to your coach or mentor at the times that you've scheduled with them. And so one of the things that, imagine you have a 24/7 version of your coach or mentor, then that's one of the things that AI can potentially give you. And just to give some examples of, how is this being used at the moment? So there are actually quite a lot of fitness coaches, mentors and things. One of the most interesting kind of implementation I saw is there's a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk who has a very popular YouTube channel. And someone had basically taken all of the videos from his YouTube channel, run them into a vector store, and then basically built a Gary Vaynerchuk AI coach on top of that, which I think, is just, it's kind of funny and brilliant at the same time. So that gives you an example of the kinds of things. Once you've got a knowledge base of some sort, then you can start to add mentoring and coaching on top of that. And, obviously we're focused more on business. So for us, the kind of areas in business that you might want to think about are, employee well-being, employee mental health, learning and development, sort of skills development, things like safety, potentially things like risk management, kind of linked to that. But also, you can take a load of very specific areas of subject matter and go, okay, well, how do I elevate the skills that my team has or my staff have, and help them really develop using an always-on coach? So, personally, I find that really quite exciting. I do think there are technical challenges involved, but I'm kind of curious to hear what you guys think about that as an area and any experiences you may have had already in that.
Yeah, so for me, mentoring's it's a really interesting topic because it's something that I've used myself quite a lot probably so far in terms of professional setting and my hobbies as well. And there's a really simple way for anybody to set up a mentor for themselves. If you can find the knowledge base, be that tutorials, YouTube videos yourself, put them into a knowledge base, and you can set up a mentor for yourself. And I think what's really interesting about offering this as as a professional service is actually there's a huge amount of value in actually how that knowledge base has been tailored and the information that you're putting across, and if you are a mentor yourself, that's what a lot of your value is. It's your knowledge, so it's certainly worth the time. Getting that down, you've probably already got it down, but getting it into a digestible format for AI.
I think there's a really interesting piece in this, and we've talked about it or alluded to it in many of our podcasts. This idea of the imaginary friend. I think we were joking about a couple of weeks ago. This idea that says that everybody has access to somebody who doesn't judge but does answer questions and does and is always available to throw ideas against. And I think it feels to me really profound across a whole variety of work contexts that we can create mentors, call them mentors, but we can create those supporting, guiding voices for our workforce. And it feels to me that there's an odd ambiguity here, that we're in one sense creating a situation where people are never alone, and secondly, actually encouraging them to talk to machines and not to people, which is a bit odd. But I do agree with you, Giles. I do think there's a really exciting opportunity for creating mentors, and I think I'm even more excited by the fact that it is actually one of the parts of the AI conversation that's available to us today, rather than some of our sort of navel gazing pieces that we do about what AI might be in the future.
We never do that. I don't know what you're talking about.
And I think one of the interesting points about AI mentors, and I think it's probably a question that a lot of people would have, is how can I still ensure that I can create a personalized learning journey for the user? And so the example that I'm going to give is, if you think of, say, you're studying for your A-levels, you've got your maths teacher that's teaching you, but then also quite often students will have like a personal one-on-one tutor as well outside of school. And so if you're starting to think, how can the AI operating, I guess, both of those two fields, it can have all of the information that your maths teacher would have in terms of the syllabus. But what the personal tutor gives you is the one-on-one time and support which the AI gives you, and it can actually give you 24 hours a day. The thing that the question that some people might have is actually that one-on-one tutor is actually, it's giving you a personalized learning journey, because that tutor knows what you're good at, and knows what you're not good at, and knows how to design your sessions together to get you up to the point that you need to be. And I think you can start to design personalized learning journeys with an AI mentor, but it's a step that certainly kind of needs to be done first with each of your potential people that are going to be taking up your course or your information. And when you design it that way, you get to a point where actually you're getting kind of like 80-90% of all the benefits of a human mentor, plus the 24/7 interactivity.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things I find really interesting about this generally as a space, apart from the fact that it could signal the death knell of McKinsey, which we've talked about before, but putting that to one side for a second, what I find interesting about it is the ability to properly digitize a person in a way that is kind of recognizably them. So going back to the Gary Vaynerchuk example, the person that built the assistant had obviously, as well as just programming in the knowledge, which would make it relatively dry, they'd also programmed in, or kind of prompted the model to behave in particular ways and to use particular turns of phrase and all of the other things that make humans feel more human. And I think that side of things, for me, it creates a huge opportunity, but I think actually also has the potential to do one of the things that the internet always does, which is massively concentrate people's attention onto a very small number of, in this case, mentors and coaches. So, it tends to make the popular ones more popular, and leave less space for lots and lots of different competitors. Unlike the real world, where a personal trainer, for example, you can have thousands of them because you've got thousands of people that need not permanent training, but need a personal training, and so for them, there's a risk, I suppose, around AI and creating these coaches as always on 24/7. You don't have to book your slot with your coach or mentor. You just dip in and out of them whenever you need them. Now, if you take the personal training example, I think there are one of the main things that a personal trainer does is force you to actually get up and train. So I think they're offering a different set of value that you can't probably offer as well with an AI. Although, again, having an AI that badgers you to get out of bed and go to the gym is I guess possible. It's just the human part of it that actually means you're going to get more incentive from a person telling you than you are from a machine, because you can just ignore the machine and not feel bad about it. So I think one of the things that's probably worth exploring a little bit is, if you look under the hood of a mentor and think and try and understand sort of, what is it, what's it doing, what are the elements of it, and Rich, you kind of started to touch on some of this. So I think that one of the things that's really interesting about mentors and is different from the kind of standard ChatGPT style interface that a lot of people are used to when they've been kind of playing around with AI is, instead of the human asking the question, it's the AI that's asking the question. And so the AI has to know what kinds of question to ask and to know how to react to the answers that are given, and to understand the objective that it has so that it can kind of move towards a particular goal. And so it's not so much a question and answer in the typical, so I suppose, Google, you ask Google a question, it gives you a bunch of answers. Instead, it's actually trying to drive towards a particular objective, and that itself is quite different, I think. It relies on a knowledge base, which might just be a single document, or it could be, a whole swathe of stuff. But I think what you were touching on earlier, Rich, I think is really interesting when you start to think about, well, how do I take what the users told me in my coaching session or in across the coaching sessions, and how do I distill that so that the model can then use that in every conversation that they have subsequently. Because obviously, the way the models work is they don't remember anything from the last time you spoke to them. And so as people building these kind of systems, we have to be the ones that determine what's important for them to remember and what isn't. And so optimizing these kind of mentoring systems is partly helping it understand what questions it needs to ask, helping it to distill the information that it's been given already, using that to make sure that subsequent conversations are human, if you like. And then I think the other area is, in fact, two more. So one is accuracy. So how do you make sure that it's actually accurate to the area that it's trying to help you with? So, if you take the example of safety, for example, not accidentally hallucinating and saying, yeah, you should lift 150 kilos is probably a good idea. So actually ensuring that the subject matter expertise is accurate, which I think is quite important. And then also making sure that we're able to help it have some kind of personality as well. So I think all of those elements have to come together, and that means that it's not an entirely straightforward, oh, I'll just call the ChatGPT API to build this thing. It's actually, much more nuanced than that to do a really good mentor. But I think when you have all of those elements in place, then I think it can be really powerful.
It's funny, actually. So this idea of actually for a mentor, instead of me talking to the AI needs to talk to me. and that might sound like, what's the difference there? But actually, there's a lot of difference in terms of the AI being proactive and having agency to initiate. So in the case of mentors, topics and I guess lessons. And if you want to move towards this idea of, okay, it's a personalized interactive learning journey, that means it can't just be like a TED talk with some slideshows that it goes through. That there needs to be an understanding of what point you are in the journey. It needs to be able to stop and address issues as they crop up, but also get you through that journey. So get you through those slides, but with the questions along the way. And interestingly, so I've been doing some research on this this week, actually. And what I've found's been working well is actually give that the AI mentor autonomy and agency to decide what it should do next. So instead of kind of having a list of topics that it needs to go through, if you just seed it with a list of goals and expected outcomes at the end of the course, and then you also seed it with all of the chat history, which, if we're getting into the technicals, needs to be summarized as well. But if it has those two things, it can always see what point you are at the journey, and it always knows the bits you're struggling with. It can always expand on those bits, but also get you through to the end of the kind of quote unquote course.
So one of the other things then that raises, if I think about a lot of great coaches in particular, are, as well as the motivation, inspiration, and other things, they actually quite often give you a concrete list of actions, which we haven't really talked about. But this idea of, so first of all, how do you make the AI proactive? Because they're not; they just wait for a request. But then also, how do you make it structure its feedback to you as a mentee or coachee, that it's then saying, okay, here's the list of things I want you to do before our next session. And so, it feels to me as if there's definitely something in there that's around tasks and kind of the assignment of tasks and the triggering of tasks and all of that sort of stuff, which isn't in the kind of normal bog standard chat interface that we have with.
And that one for me is really interesting. That idea of determining, of the AI determining the path to the outcomes, and saying, yeah, I'm putting this in. I recognise that this needs to be achieved or be a task for the mentee. What have you. The other thing I was wondering about as you were speaking earlier, Giles, was, is it worth thinking about, or is it possible to put in considerations about how to do the mentoring? So we talked about the topics, about what it should be saying and how it's focusing on outcomes. But for instance, could you feed somebody's Myers-Briggs profile into the AI mentor to give it a guidance of how it's speaking to its mentee and to absolutely shape the tone and approach it's taking?
So, I mean, theoretically, yes, absolutely. The bit I think it would be interesting to test actually is, how well versed in Myers-Briggs or any of the other frameworks the AI actually is. And I think, as a general rule, what I've seen, if you look at AI's knowledge across different categories, and particularly where it's sort of publicly available information, they're actually really good at, or the models generally are pretty good at understanding what those things are. So if you say I'm ENTP or whatever, then we should test it. I think, because that it's a fascinating way of seeing if it will react and respond in a different way. But I suppose really what you're asking is, can you give it a potted deal with this person in this way? So, ENTP might be the shorthand for, this person likes to be dealt with in this way, that way, and the other way. And I can't remember Myers-Briggs well enough to know you to be able to tell you what those are.
Yeah, but it's a process of personalization, or it's another layer of personalization. So if we talked about personalization being in the path that somebody's going through the mentoring process, so that the AI being allowed to set the route from the start point to the objectives and tailor those to the responses they get, the AI is getting, tailor those to the people. And we've talked about various other, the personalization in time, that the time that people talk to it, and how they're responding, and where they're responding, and so forth, i.e. able to do it. It feels to me a really interesting piece, because it is, if you are a mentor, one of the things you need to recognize is how your mentees are responding, and which approach to take to get the best response from them. And sometimes you have to be gentle, and sometimes you have to be sort of coaxing and letting them work it through. Sometimes some people react very well to just being told. And it just occurred to me as you were talking that actually it would be a really interesting layer on the AI mentor system to have some kind of recognition of people's either explicit or implicit preferences about how they're being talked to.
Yeah, and one of the other example AIs that I saw was actually one that had absorbed, basically been given a knowledge base of a set of coaching methodologies, essentially. And so having, once it understands the coaching methodology, then the question is, can it then apply that? Because essentially what you're saying is, you might start with the gentle, the helping people work it out for themselves by asking questions, but eventually after 3 or 4 coaching sessions, you might just go, oh, for God's sake, just do this. This is why I'm not a coach, by the way. But I think, having, or either through retrieval augmented generation, so a knowledge base that you feed into it in the prompt, or actually potentially a fine-tuned version of a model which is fine-tuned specifically for coaching. And I could certainly see there being a benefit in the fine-tuning end of things, because what you're then able to do is to say, okay, we know it will always behave consistently when it comes to the methodology that it applies to coaching. Now, what I think you then have to do is to say, okay, we've talked about lots of different things that you want to feed into the model, and one of the big issues you then have is confusing the hell out of it, because you're trying to tell it to do 15 different things, and it's going, whoa, I don't understand. So actually, understanding what to feed in when is also pretty important. And how to distill that down into like 1 or 2 sentences that you can feed in, so it goes, yeah, okay, got this.
So one question actually, so if you're a coach or a mentor today, what could you be doing like in the today or this week in terms of getting an understanding of how you might be able to clone yourself, and if that would work?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, because actually there's a broader piece of it, not just for coaches and mentors, that I think the way people should be thinking about how do they leverage AI is start to think about the knowledge that they have and how to distill that down. And you see a very wide range in organizations of some that have everything kind of proceduralized and they know exactly how to do X, Y, and Z. And so that knowledge base kind of already exists. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have organizations where it's all in the heads of the people. So if you're in that latter camp, you're going to find it much harder than the ones who've got everything kind of proceduralized. But the good news is, things like being able to just talk to a camera or even just record it audio and use that as a way of building a knowledge base is entirely plausible. So I think, it doesn't have to be a really formalized, structured document, although it probably helps if it is. You can just record, do a brain dump, and then and that's the start of your knowledge base, and then you can tune what's in there over time. So I think that's worth looking at. One of the other areas actually that I haven't touched on, but I think is kind of interesting as well, is because you can now record your voice and turn it into an AI generated voice, and you can do the same for your face. Creating much more personal mentors and coaches becomes feasible in a way that makes them much more human. And this is the point at which I say that actually I'm not here at all, and this is my AI avatar talking. It's not, by the way, but but would that were true, I could be down the pub. So I think there are, so where we are now is probably the more basic chat interface, but there are people working on that much more personal kind of digital version of the human being, which again I think adds a whole different dimension to this mentoring idea.
Well, I was going to ask Giles, quite apart from you being our very own uncanny valley, but I was going to ask about the staging of this, because obviously typing your interaction with your mentor is possibly a bit of a barrier, and in terms of the alternate experience of actually sitting chatting to somebody, there is I suspect a point at which the chat interface is actually a fairly significant limitation at the moment on this idea of AI mentors. But are we at the stage where, for instance, you could have an audio conversation that is a chat to, in the same way that some of us chat away to Alexa, that actually we could be chatting to a voice. Now, we're recognizing that it is still generated and it will still have that slight uncanny valley experience. But actually, the idea of sitting chatting to somebody feels a much more immediate and possibly much more engaging experience. And is that possible at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the latest generation of OpenAI's Whisper model, so that does kind of bi-directional speech to text, text to speech. There's a whole load of other ones. So Amazon have one, obviously, which powers Alexa. Google does as well, which is okay Google. But essentially, adding an audio sort of input to a chat window is actually pretty straightforward nowadays. So that part certainly you can do. Personalizing the voice so it sounds like the coach or mentor is a bit more challenging and requires specific services. But if all you're after is something that sounds like one of a relatively small selection of voices that they have, but actually do nowadays sound realistically like humans. So the latest version of the Whisper model does actually sound genuinely like a real person. I mean, I think it's interesting though as well, because there are businesses that have been fairly successful in the corporate sphere offering services through Slack, so question and answer type services through Slack, for example. So it's definitely a channel that has some value and people can work with. And actually, I mean, when you then think about, well, how much of the human interaction is now spoken person to person versus, through Slack or through other things, then weirdly, in terms of the human interaction, we've moved more towards the kind of text chat channel. Although, interestingly, my kids always send each other voicemails on WhatsApp rather than typing stuff. So, maybe it's going the other way.
But I do think that around this idea of mentoring specifically, and perhaps the wider bit about teaching, that the human to human spoken engagement is still incredibly important. We're looking at the damage done to a whole generation of kids gone through university and school and COVID, and done everything remotely and everything in a non-human to human immediate way. And I think that it feels to me that if this type of mentoring is to cross the barrier between being something that's quite interesting to something that is used every day by many people, that you'll have to cross that barrier of how are you engaging with the AI, with your mentor, and where you can make that spoken, particularly, and possibly video. I think it feels to me that video is less important, but certainly be able to have a chat with somebody as if you were on the phone to them. That feels would be quite a big and important step towards it becoming acceptable.
I quite like the idea of your AI mentor's voicemail, where it goes, "Sorry, I can't talk to you right now, but I'm down at the beach." Or I'm just sweeping through my ROM.
Funnily enough, it's reasonably easy to hook into like the Alexa AI and plug in
Don't say
your own
that.
personal knowledge base.
She's just listening to you now.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so you can have that personalized conversation. Now today, it's reasonably easy to set up.
So we have those areas. Then the area one is this area that we should and can gather our knowledge if we're wanting to set up mentoring services, and create knowledge bases. And presumably on that one, actually, we also need to be thinking about RAG and extending the experience of the mentor that we're setting up.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the assumption is that the way you set it up will be with some sort of vector database with retrieval augmented generation and probably some kind of chat history. Now, you can do that in straightforward way just by using, ChatGPT custom GPTs, if for a really basic one. If you want something more advanced, then you'd need a platform that enables you to set things up yourself, or provides a bit more sophistication in the way that you customize it. But the steps themselves and the things you need to think about are the same, because you have to know, okay, well, what's the process you're trying to take somebody through? What are the objectives you have for them? What's the expertise, like the subject matter expertise that you need to think about? And you need, the AI to understand enough about how to ask questions rather than answer them. And it is worth, just on a technical note, worth kind of observing that the majority of the platforms, when they store things like chat history, they always store human question and AI response. And one of the issues you have with coaching and mentoring is that it's actually AI question and human response that you want to store as a pair. So you actually have to have a platform that operates slightly differently in order to make it work well for mentoring. And
the other bit is when you're talking about objectives, and Rich, when you were talking earlier, this idea of sort of a learning path is very much objective driven, and where the objectives are relatively clear and easily defined. So presumably the path to them is relatively easily worked out. But do you guys see AI mentoring as being operating in more general areas, i.e., I'm a junior marketing person and my mentor is going to help me through my career over the next 3 or 4 years and suggest things I need to learn and suggest places I need to be or people I need to meet, or that sort of more
buddy.
That less that buddy approach, that less directed side of mentoring.
Well, yeah. So if I give a very specific example of my own experience at the moment, and I would say it's possibly not quite mentoring, but currently I use ChatGPT all the time to help me with coding, and so I learn a massive amount. I mean, one of the areas where it helps in particular is if you're trying to pick up a new library which you've never used before, and it understands it already. So you just ask it questions and it goes, oh, here's how you do it, which would have taken me days to do if I were doing it by myself. And so, I always think of AI as having the potential to give us mere mortals superpowers. And one of them is, I suppose the biggest superpower that AI gives you is the ability to process massive amounts of information very, very quickly, which we as humans, we just can't do. And so I think as a general buddy, absolutely. I think where you can make that more powerful from an organizational standpoint is to go, okay, it's not just what the marketing person's interested in, it's also what the organization wants them to be good at. And when you start combining those two things together, then you start to get much more productive organizations.
Yeah, I agree with that. And especially the point around the knowledge base that the AI has access to, because if you think in terms of what questions can it answer, it could potentially have access to much more data, all the best coaching practices, to a level that would be impossible for a human to know or have access to. And if you're thinking in terms of an organization, if it's learning based on data that your employees have, based on your employee conversations with it could be able to say, oh, somebody 2 years ago had that exact same question. Here's what we worked through then, and that's knowledge that's retained within that organization and used again, rather than probably lost in that situation.
I love that. It's always been one of the principles of Insight Flow, is that it's a place where you don't, where organizations make sure that they don't lose their DNA of knowledge. And I love this idea that says that the AI mentor system can build on examples and build on experience over time.
I think, that thing about Google Drive is where knowledge goes to die, and you could say the same about SharePoint or OneDrive or whatever. But I do think, the ability to then process that information, pull it back, and make it relevant again is something that AIs have an enormous amount of power, not just in mentoring, but kind of across the piece. So anyway, that's the mentor kind of idea and area, and like I said, like you said, Graham, I'm really excited about it because I think it has a huge amount of potential. I think in much the same way YouTube has been a really amazing platform for experts, I think the equivalent for AI will allow those experts to elevate themselves even further. It's also, by the way, been a great platform for charlatans. So unfortunately, with the experts, you'll probably also get the charlatans. But, hey, have to take the rough with the smooth.
Yeah, we have to apply the same principles of doubt and checking and cross-referencing to AI mentors in the same way that we would to any other advisor we choose, I suspect.
Yeah, and I think, in the world that we inhabit, which is in the kind of business space, then caveat emptor applies in the sense that you have to do your due diligence when you're looking to get mentors into your organization that are AI driven, and make sure that they are properly sort of managed and looked after, and the information that they're using is based on proper research, proper methodologies, all that kind of stuff. So actually understanding the knowledge base becomes quite important at that point.
Excellent. So it does mean that I'm going to have more imaginary friends.
You will have a friend, yes.
So with that's a chat and a look at something that is exciting, Giles, and those of you who are looking at the video of this will see that you can actually tell a little bit of between the real Giles and the AI generated one. There are details that give it away a little bit, although it is all a wee bit uncanny valley. I think it's fascinating, this one, because the idea of a personalized, intelligent, permanently on mentor and supporter and advisor feels very science fiction. And it's interesting really interesting to me that this is one of the ones that we've chosen to be today's applications and things that we can do today. So yeah, I think I also am incredibly excited by these possibilities across education and across the workplace and improving staff and all sorts of other bits and pieces. I think that this is the type of area where AI will really make a difference to our businesses and probably to our society. So that's it for this week. I've been Graham.
I've been Giles.
And I've been Rich.